One. That looks like the right thing. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to try to bring the lights up as much as possible because it's really annoying on the video camera to hear the person talk but not see them and only see the screen. So I'll kind of flip back a little bit, back and forth a little bit today. Okay, so we're on to the planning phase material, and this relates to learning outcome number 2 in our syllabus, which is create a business case for a systems project. And we are right here for planning, related to should we do it? All right, and I'm going to immediately jump over to the decision-based learning material. So DBL, well, you should go through the link. All right, let's just see if I'm still logged in or not. I am. Okay, so the first question here, so if you recall, for every single decision, there's going to be something at the top. The very first question also has some background information. So the overall context of the problem here in this module that I've created is that there is an IP-based phone service and they want to manage their sales force a little bit better. And they give you this additional piece of information related to this question below. The information is they would like you to consolidate all the records of sales employees used into one database with mobile or browser-based management of that data. The question is the business problem sufficiently clear at this point, and can it likely be solved by technology? How do I decide? So if I click on that, this would be the deck of slides that come up. And the high-level idea here is that when you talk to people about their business problems, you're going to come to one of two conclusions. One of them is, I think this is a problem that can be solved with technology, or 2, I don't think this is a problem that could be solved with technology. And you should be hopefully strong enough to say no, rather than taking on the project if there's no chance in this world that you're ever going to succeed, regardless of how good of a programmer you are. Alright, so here are the characteristics we use to make a decision. Would somebody like to read the ones that are on the left side for me? Go for it.
Okay, characteristics of a problem that is solvable with IT. You understand the problem that the client is facing or the goal they may want to achieve. Customer names the technology that they want you to implement.
Okay, so if either one of those are true, then then you should probably proceed with the project, at least at this stage. All right, and then some signs that we shouldn't proceed. Somebody else read this next one. Go for it.
Client goal is nebulous or unrealistic. Problem is exclusively human-based problems.
Okay, great. All right, now let's go through some sample problems then. Customer says they take orders in the store, but would like to be able to take orders online. Is this sufficient information that a solution is likely attainable for them?
No.
Yes or no? Okay, well, you say no, why?
Because what is the problem they're trying to solve by taking orders online? Is it that they're not taking orders fast enough, or that customers are tired of waiting in line, or like those kinds of things? Because if it's just to be able to say that they take orders online, but the system's not used or the customers don't want it, then it's not a super great project.
Thanks. Anybody have another idea, an argument?
The question is if it's solvable by IT.
Okay, let's go back up to the previous thing. Let's look at the characteristics. Based on what they told you, does it look like it's column 1 or column 2? Is it nebulous? Yeah? Or is it that you can kind of understand what they're trying to accomplish?
I just want to take
I
it.
can understand the goal, but not the problem.
Okay. Okay, what about that second one there, about that it is solvable with IT? What's that other bullet point?
Customer names the technology.
Okay, so, all right, so as we go back to this one, does this have characteristics of, okay, so we don't necessarily have to understand why they're doing it in this case, but they're just saying, hey, as a if you're a software developer, can you, and you've built 100 websites, can you build one that takes purchase orders?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what, so I guess from the developer standpoint, you know enough to say, yeah, this sounds like something reasonable. Okay, so we say yes, and why? Because the goal seems reasonable. Like we think as a developer, we could meet that need, and they've named the type of technology that they want to implement. So we think we could probably hit that target. Okay, next one. Customer is in the food business and says that they want to break into into online jewelry sales, and they want an application written for that. Is this sufficient information that you as a technology provider think that a solution is likely attainable for them?
No.
And you say no. Why? Okay. It's a little bit nebulous as to in terms of what they're after, but in a different way. I guess you probably could create an online jewelry store, but in this case, it just seems like such a break from what they normally do that it raises questions. So I would even add in here that it's probably unrealistic as well. If you're in one area of business, you probably shouldn't be jumping into other areas of business that are completely unrelated, or at least go in hesitantly. Okay. Okay, next one. Customer says that they need to train employees regularly on safety as required by government regulations and would like you to install a learning management system for them to facilitate the creation and delivery of training. Do you think that as an IT person that it's likely that you could create a solution that will be successful for them? And you have to say yes or no, and then you have to say why in terms of the reasons that we had earlier. I see Eric nodding. So, all right, and so what's the reason? Give me a reason.
No, I'm just nodding my head.
No. We'll take a stab at a reason.
So I guess for me, nodding my head, I guess you think I'm assuming I said yes to the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, they can just go to the government. So I don't think it'd be that difficult to get information from the government regarding regulations to how to like do whatever they're trying to do. Because the government always provides a lot of data, like framework for information doing stuff.
So you think it's feasible that you could get the information? Do you think, have they identified the class of technology that they want you to implement?
Yes.
Okay, so therefore you've got a high likelihood of being successful if you just pick any of them, at least as a starter. Maybe if they made it even more vague than this in several different ways, you might be hesitant. But in this case, you'd probably be feeling pretty good. All right, so yes, we think we can do this. Why? Because they mentioned both the problem and the solution they want, and learning management software is common. So yeah, we think we could do this. All right, let's do another one. Customer says that employee turnover is high. Can you implement as a developer a solution for us related to this? Yes or no? Yeah. What do you think?
They're almost there, I think. I mean, we've got really specifically what they want, but they're just asking for any solution. They haven't named any sort of solution or any sort of technology that they would like to see used to solve it.
So if they're almost there, I mean, which one do you think, which categories does this fall into based on the prompts we have?
It's human-based.
I hear mumbles, but I don't hear clear yes or no.
No. I don't think it is because it's very human-based.
Yes. Maybe, yeah. What are some reasons why you might have turnover at a company?
Crappy management.
Yeah, terrible management. Actually, I think it's like usually the number one reason why people leave a job is because they disagree with their management. And they just don't feel good about being there anymore. Yeah, so with time it becomes a little bit easier to recognize that sort of thing. So if they're saying, hey, fix this problem, that is probably that they're not saying management. Can you install some software that's going to fix this problem with turnover? You should be thinking, no, this is not a technology problem. Okay, next one down. No, sounds like it's an organizational issue that technology will not resolve. Another one, customer says that they want to create an application that will revolutionize travel. Is this sufficient information that a solution is likely attainable for them?
No.
Why? Justify it.
Not specific.
Nebulous.
It's kind of nebulous. Yeah, and this is probably a better, maybe some of the other questions weren't as clear as this one, but this one was real leading. Yeah, this is very nebulous in terms of, this is kind of like .com speak back then. We're going to revolutionize this industry because we have a website. Okay? Not sure, anyway, they haven't really made that clear. So it's going to so basically, if you don't revolutionize the travel industry for them with your application, then you failed. Do you want to accept that responsibility? No, at least not at this point. Oh. Okay, I think this is the last one. Customer says that employees working out in the field use paperwork to record details of work completed. So they're writing things down in paper forms. They would like this paperwork to be completed electronically in the field.
No. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, everybody's saying yes. Okay, why do you say yes? Okay.
But it doesn't point to a specific type of way electronically. It doesn't say whether it's the internet.
It doesn't have to have all the characteristics that are here, just maybe one of them. So if the problem or the goal, if the goal in particular is really clear that they're trying to achieve, and it's reasonable that it could be achieved by technology, then you should probably be like, yeah, we can do that. Even if they don't name the technology, we should already be thinking, oh, what would be some technologies you would use to now enable people to write something down in the field using not pen and paper?
Mobile.
Yeah, it could be a mobile device. Check, 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 check. I mean, it used to be like home inspectors used to come through with pads of paper and they do check boxes on lots of pages, and then later on they would come through with iPads and go with their finger, saying, after they check all the light sockets and things like that. So, all right. And that doesn't seem to relate at all to human-based politics, or it's somewhat nebulous in terms of the technology, but you feel like you can solve this. Okay. Point being, you shouldn't take on stuff if you don't think it's reasonable for you to solve it. Again, back to Vanilla Ice, the sage. If you got a problem, you'll all solve it. But if you can't, don't take on the project. Okay, moving on. All right, so here's a depiction of the life cycles: planning, analysis, development, or design implementation. And we're talking about this right here, planning. And planning can consist of two different parts. One related to system requests, and another one related to creating a business case. And this part in particular is really important because I want you to write up something in this area for your projects. Okay, so having filled the role of a technology manager as well as a steering committee member, this is what it feels like to be managing a group of programmers in an organization. You have a lot of people in the organization that are not programmers that are saying, do my project, do my project, do my project. The problem is, as you start to estimate, well, how long would it take to do these projects, as you look across them, you realize that the number of years that it would take to complete those projects far outstrips the number of employees you have, resource-wise, to get it done, for example, in a single year. And just kind of an off, a different context topic here that relates to this, just for fun. Budgeting as it relates to our government. So at my last school, well, actually not my last school, where I got my PhD, Arizona State, I was talking to somebody who was a liaison with the government. What do they call those guys? He was a lobbyist on behalf of Arizona State, and he talked about how government works, which I thought was completely mind-blowing to me. I just like learning surprising facts about the world. He says that the way the government works is they approve massive budgets. Let's just say in a given year, there's going to be $500 billion available to spend on museums and bridges and military and all kinds of stuff across the United States. What they'll do in committees is they will approve $1 trillion in spending, knowing fully well that they're only going to have $500 billion to actually spend. And then later on, they have a second round of votes and oversight that relates to giving out the $500 billion that they actually have. And so a lot of politicians actually vote yes on the front end and back on the no end, and no on the back end. That way in any given context they can say whether they voted for or against something depending on what the constituents want to hear, which is a little bit crazy. Did you follow that? They approve more money to spend than they're actually going to get, and then they only approve then a subset of that later on when they actually get the money. So anyway, relating that back to software management again, you have to make choices. You would like to say yes to everybody, but unfortunately you can't say yes to everybody, so you have to pick. And so, has anybody been on a sports team, or actually been on the playground, for example, and they do the picking for teams and you didn't get picked? Yeah. How do you feel when you don't get picked?
Bad.
Picked on.
Picked on, bad, right. So, nobody wants to be the person that gets left out. And even though we're learning a lot of technical skills here, believe me, a lot of what's going on in the software development world is about people relationships and stuff. And as a manager, people start to hate you if you say no to anything in any context. I've had people that even wanted to throw down and have punches in the parking lot about it because they just would dislike me so much because I wouldn't approve their projects. And it's like, well, but I was talking to the boss, and the boss says I can't do your project, and I can't tell you why. But anyway, so there's a whole social dynamic to saying no to people, but it has to be done because you can't do everything that people ask. And then here's just an off-color comic that I found. Nobody wants to be left out. Anyway, I was just Googling picking teams and that came up. Alright, I hope I haven't offended anybody who's formerly a conjoined twin but related to one. Okay, so moving forward, that's just totally wrong. But alright, so I've got a question for you. Okay, something for you guys to work on in a group. How would you decide which projects to approve or not approve if you were part of the management team that made the decision? So break up in your little groups and decide what criteria you would use if you were making the decision, the judgment call of what are you going to approve and what are you not going to approve. So assume you're going to get a lot of them. Yeah.
What kind of information do we have about
This is like the court.
Do we know?
You get to decide what you want to know.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
We have to check it. So is this relevant?
I kind of feel like it's also a lot of it has to do with like Riverwind is and like preparing the project is actually important. Yeah, like this is what we are doing.
Yeah, and then also I guess check. Like it'd be nice to have I'm telling Greg. I'm gonna be writing on the board and I'm like gonna tell him everything.
Just draw a heart with
We gotta do that. So we erase everything before we get his name.
I want to do everything that I have to make like I have this reason.
He would know.
All right. Let's get some ideas. How are you going to decide which things to approve or not approve if you're part of the management team? Yeah.
How well it aligns with like the strategic imperatives of the company as a whole.
Okay, strategic alignment. All right. Other ideas? Yep.
What kind of profitability is it going to supply?
Okay. Profit.
Say find a way to measure like the urgency of the project or timeliness, if there's something that can be done later or
Okay. Urgency,
Yeah.
right?
like benefit to the company as far as market share.
Okay. All right. Yep.
I would say like see if they
right?
have, yeah.
Okay.
If they have like a schedule or like a plan already in place for the project.
Okay. Yeah.
Should we do this project ourselves or should we outsource it?
Okay. And related to that, maybe I'll adjust it a little bit. So you're just deciding as a management team, you have money and people to take it on or not. Maybe I'd bend your answer a little bit to say, can we do it? So,
As far
and
as
if we,
cost or as
no,
far
can
as
we do it
resources?
internally? Like, do we have the technical capability? And if we don't, then maybe we should look at outsourcing it. So I'll just kind of make that one be,
Capability.
capability, yeah. Do we have the capability of actually doing that ourselves? Yeah.
Building off that, like resources, like time, and money.
Okay, resources,
Yeah.
it's just available resources or?
Available resources.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe someone else outside could do it, but you don't have the money to pay them. Yeah.
Is the use case wide enough, or is it too narrow of a project that the time you spend on it's only going to help a couple people versus a lot of people?
Okay, so maybe I'll just talk, maybe say scope of benefit. All right, let's stop there for now, and we'll move on a little bit. Okay. So building on some of the things that you talked about, some of the main categories might be, just cash on cash return. It could just be savings, reducing an expense that currently exists. Could be legal requirements all the time. There are laws that are passed that says you have to conform with something, otherwise you need to exit business. And then I thought I was kind of relating to the last one about the scope of the benefit. It could be the seniority of the person requesting the project. You might think it's a stupid idea, but the company owner is asking you to do it, you work for him, and maybe it's for his daughter's science fair, I don't know. But if he's paying you, you might say, yes sir. Also, you might look at the satisfaction, some benefit related to the customers or just internal people. Maybe there's pain points. Maybe you don't have it directly tied to profits or reduced expenses, but you might some people just might hate doing things a certain way, and you can make their lives easier. I call it risk reduction, and so there might be security issues that are going on, saying, yeah, we're currently operating as a company, but unfortunately, unless we sink $1 million into this area, we're currently exposed. We can easily be hacked and taken advantage of. So, anyway, all right, moving on. Any questions about that? Well, actually, any questions about that area? Any of those topics we brought in there? All right, moving on. Here's another depiction of the systems development lifecycle. This whole block right here represents what happens in planning, and then we get to the analysis phase, which is a lot of the documentation and the interviewing that we've been doing so far in this class. One of the first things that might happen is a project sponsor, especially in a very formalized environment, could fill out a request or submit a request for an application to be built. Now, for things to follow a process to get approved, there's kind of an extreme. In some situations with startups or sometimes if it's a small organization and you're close to your boss, sometimes you can just go out to lunch and have quick conversations, and it might be, hey, can you add in a form to our website that allows people to submit complaints or inquiries? Like that probably doesn't, that probably suffices. You could draw something on a napkin, you could send it in an email, you could have a conversation, you got it covered. In other contexts, you have those bosses that are receiving tons and tons of requests, and they have to decide who are going to be the winners and who are going to be the losers based on criteria like these. And so if you have a bunch of criteria that you need to decide among, then one of the things a business may require is some type of request form. So a request form can be thought of as a job application, but for projects. So the project is applying to be approved for your work. I have a link in the Learning Suite today for a Health IT Care Systems request form. I'd like this part of the room to look at page 1 of it, this part of the room to look at page 2 of it, and this part of the room look at page 3 of it, and just kind of look for things that strike you, catch your interest in terms of, hey, I probably wouldn't have thought of that, or I think it's really important if I were to create a request form. Hopefully it's there. Is it there on today's material? It might be in the 3rd column of the schedule as part of the class activities.
Yeah, there's 2, doesn't matter which one.
It's just a PDF for adults.
Let's see if I jump around enough. Oh yeah, sorry, I did put in 2. The Word, it doesn't matter which one you do, but the Word document shows you some stuff that there's some macros and things like that built into the Word file that are highlighted in the Word version and not the PDF version. So let's see if I can find it in my list of things. All right, I'll be back in a second. You pull it up and I'll pull it up. This can you do page this part of the room do page 1, which is this one. This part of the room do page 2, and this part of the room do page 3. And then after you're through with that, you can look at the other pages. Or maybe another way of asking the question is, what do you learn from studying this particular system request form?
Oh, was there like we want a new system? Okay, and we're like, do we approve this? So those committees are the people that decide. Presentation.
So Dr. Kettle, is it pretty common for companies to break down their costs into like really small sections so they have a really good idea of how much it's actually going to cost?
It's completely depend on the
software container.
Some companies are they try to be down to the penny, and some companies it's just the good old boy network.
Throw some money at it and say,
Yeah, it's
get it
like
done.
they say, hey, can you and your team get this done? And you say, yeah. So how long will it take? You say 6 months, and they say we need it in 3. It's not really a conversation about cost.
Gotcha.
In that sense.
It's very, very different between companies then. Oh, I just got orangutan arms.
Alright. So I like this.
That's nice.
Item description, patient data, employee data, finance. This is pretty sweet. HIPAA regulations.
Just download one of those health form docs. Page 2 over there.
So these are like the things that they prize or value in their company. So that would be like on the server.
Which one?
These like patient needs.
So you know it's not designed.
They just have it.
Basically asking data is required, is this going to benefit us, who's going to use this?
Alright, team page 1.
Already,
What did you guys note of interest on that first page?
It's important to get somebody to sign off on your project.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, interestingly, somebody has to vouch for it. And it looked like high-level people might need to sign off for it. Now notice that this is in a healthcare context, and I think that kind of flavors the whole thing. That just the fact that it's a healthcare context, as I went through it, kind of made me realize, oh, so if I'm in different disciplines, there might be different regulations and other things going on that relate to the projects that we approve. So there's not necessarily going to be one project approval form in this world. There could be different things that you need to be concerned about as a manager depending on the industry that you're working in. And anyway, so back to this one again, we have, it looks like an executive director, which sounds like a very senior person that has to sign off on anything that gets done. Anything else that jumps out to you about page 1? Yes?
They want you to start anticipating costs.
Okay, they want to know how much it's going to cost. I particularly am interested in the fact that they have what sounds like some acquisition costs as well as some maintenance costs. A lot of organizations, they ask the IT team, how much or how long will it take to develop this? What they don't ask is how much will it cost to maintain this over time. That's a very common thing to miss, and so it's a good thing that they're thinking about that. Actually, I had a student here at school, somebody sent me something just out of the blue today, asking about a project that they would like to work on, and I said, your big issue is not about developing it up front. Your big issue in this particular thing thing that you want to solve is maintenance, because the data sources that you're going to be getting it from are going to change all the time. So if you got it built right up front, you need to continue to hire a developer to maintain it over time, because it's always going to be changing. All right, anything else from the front page? All right, middle section, anything of interest in there that jumps out to you? Yeah, like,
Well, I was just thinking that it's just, with this, on the second page and on the first page, it's like they're supposed to have it planned already.
okay.
Like, everything planned, like, they're supposed to, like, they're asking, like, okay, have you gotten approval already, so it's like, this isn't like, oh, hey, I have this idea, here it is, more of what is going into this, like.
So yeah, there's definitely a higher bar in terms of effort, you know, for this form as opposed to just talking to somebody. At one company I worked at, it was kind of a startup environment. We called it the Hey Dude Network. If you wanted to get anything done or approved, you just go, hey dude. Like, hey dude, can I do this? Hey dude, can you get me that? That's how the developers were referred to as well, hey dude. Yeah, this is definitely more than the Hey Dude Network. You have to think about costs and all this other stuff up front, which is going to require some planning and effort on your part. Anything else jump out? Yeah.
There's for some specific industry requirements, because in the health industry you had to have like the FDA approval, you had to consider HIPAA laws and all those things that with patient data.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of different companies out there that's not something that's on their approval forms. Over here.
I thought it was interesting that they submit this form to a clinical steering committee, and they schedule presentations. So they're they watch and they care about what's being implemented or changed.
Yeah, isn't that interesting in this case? In addition to submitting an application for this, in essence, if you're the person submitting it, you have to go and put on a presentation to a group, which is going to decide whether or not your project is approved. That's a real interesting thing to get your head around. Anything else on page 2? Yeah.
I was just thinking how this page kind of is to simplify all the legal requirements and the system requirements. So like at the bottom in 6, it's talking about like data repository, like what information do you need to like determine what kind of type of an interface do you need.
Yeah. Yeah, they've thought about it. Okay, how about this third group over here? Anything? Yeah.
I think the biggest thing we noticed was that on top of the cost, they're really worried about risks. It's already been mentioned, but the data especially.
Okay, so they're looking about risks. Okay.
The last 2 questions especially.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's very forward thinking what they have there, talking about a recovery plan. And to be honest, that's almost a little bit overwhelming for me to think about as a regular business person submitting a proposal for something. Like, look, I just needed some data for my little group in sales or whatever else it is. I don't know anything about how to do systems recovery and backups and stuff like that. So I don't know what their environment's like there, but they're making people think about that. Yeah, so other stuff.
So they also considered the budget allocation. Like they're trying to get like new hardware, maybe, and they're asking, hey, where should we allocate this hardware budget? Into the ad operational budget or something else?
In bigger organizations, you deal with budgets, and so sometimes you have to have a project funded out of a particular budget, and you can't just do it. I kind of run into budgets all the time here at BYU. I have at least 3 different budgets I'm working with at any given moment. I have a budget for me as an individual. I have that I'm allowed to just spend money and go to conferences and stuff. I have 2 different budgets for the lab that we maintain, and one of them, at any given moment, it could have $100,000 in there, and that's for major capital replacement. But then if I have just little onesie-twosie things that need to be replaced in the lab, a keyboard or a monitor, I can just kind of take that out of one account that allows for that. So yeah, budgets are important. All right, yes?
Where do we submit proposals for those budgets?
Pardon me?
Where do we submit proposals for those budgets?
What, to get access to ours?
No, this like for that money. It's interesting.
Now as we start talking about budgets, now we're getting into a whole different conversation. We're pretty civil here at BYU, but in corporate environments are famous for being pretty hostile as it relates to budgets. Because basically they start with a pie. Okay guys, we're going to split $100 million this year. You know, they don't say it this way, but it's in essence, okay, who wants it? IT says, we want it. And then, sales and marketing is like, we want it, and finance is, we want it, and, anyway, it gets crazy. People really get antagonistic and they get mad if they don't have a budget to do certain things. And so oftentimes, as an IT division, of which in any company could easily get 10% of gross revenue that a company brings in. So if you're a $100 million company, you might have $10 million a year of budget. That's a pretty good percentage. Can't remember what I was going to say after that, but anyway, that's just how it I was halfway into saying something, I lost my train of thought. But budgets, oftentimes in a yearly budgeting session, people battle out, what are you going to get for the year? That's not the only way to get a budget, that's one of them.
How do you apply for your budget?
How do you apply for your budget?
No, how do you fight for your budget?
How do you fight for it? It's you make a business case. Part of what we're talking about today is making a business case so that you get access to funds that somebody else wants. And it's kind of interesting in this. So consider this in an organization. Imagine there's $1 million sitting in a bank account, and sales and marketing is saying, hey, if we hire 100 extra people and pay them this year, then we could do some great things to grow the company. And you over in IT are like, well, I want that money because I want to build this software project. And what if it's just either or, and one group loses and one group wins? Both of them have an argument for they're going to be able to grow and expand the company. And so unless you slice up that money, somebody could be a winner and somebody could be a loser, and somebody's going to spend the whole year going, man, what I could have done as a manager if I would have just had that money. So at one company I was at, we used to argue about stupid things. Like we'd pay many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for developer salaries, but then if we had things like cell phone bills, just minor payments, we would spend 6 months arguing over something stupid like $30 and just fighting over a budget for something like that. Anyway, it's just weird how budgets play out. All right, moving on. So on this page we have a depiction then of our request form being submitted to something that we're calling a steering committee. And I like this little graphic here that represents our project possibly being thrown in the trash if it doesn't pass that first level. Now again, it could be just a hallway conversation with your boss. Will you do this, yes or no? Should we do this, yes or no? Or it could be that formal form that we turned in, and for a variety of reasons, ROI, security, whatever it is, we might decide that it's important or it's not important enough to the company. And so if it's not, it gets dumped. If it is successful in getting past the steering committee, those making a decision about whether it should be approved, then it goes on to another step. But first I want to ask a question, which is, as it relates to a steering committee, and I want you to jump in groups for a second here, who do you think in a company should be on a steering committee and make those decisions? Somebody's got to be in a group that says yes or no. So take a minute, maybe 60 seconds, to talk about who you think should be on that team. Me. Yeah!
Only I. What did Ernie say? The approval? Yeah. Portfolio. I also feel like it also depends on the level. If it's like a huge company like I don't want to be executive. But if it's just like an internal IT project, so basically people that represent whatever chunk of the company, whether it's the entire
Hello everyone in the online world, we're having a blast. Wish you could be here.
Hey, no problem, man.
All right, what'd you come up with? Start over here. What do you think you might throw on this decision-making committee?
You'd be over the business.
Okay, so somebody related to, you're saying business, operations, or something like that? Okay, anything else? Board? You're thinking maybe the board? Maybe. I'll put a question mark next to that. If they make operational decisions, then I don't think board members in terms of stock and stuff are allowed to make those kind of things. There's rules about that.
Yeah, it's legal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a more straightforward way of saying it. Yes, it's illegal. Yeah. A COO? Okay. How about in the middle? Yeah.
I'd say it would depend on the level of project. So if it's at the overarching company level project, then you would want the executives to be involved. If it's in like a division project, then it would probably just be the heads of that division. And I think generally it's the stakeholders of the project. I would say that's really important. So whoever is like, we kind of learn in Ernie's class that whoever's function is involved in making the project happen and who's going to be using time and resources, they should be involved in deciding the project.
That does raise the possibility, though, that if there are 100 different projects to review in a year, that and you're only going to approve, I don't know, 20 of them, that there's 100 different. If the composition is based on the stakeholder for the application for the project, that we could have a different steering committee for all 100. In a worst case scenario, all 100 applications. So that could be a little hard to manage. Yeah.
I think part of it depends on what your company values most. So if like I had the opportunity to try to sell something to BYU, and the department I was talking to, I found out that they valued their budget more than anything. And so the people on the steering committee were the stingiest with money probably that they could have found at BYU.
Okay.
And so I think, I mean, probably if you went to Google, it'd be the opposite. It'd be all focused on innovation and less on how do we pinch pennies or something.
Innovation, okay. Clayton?
I also think it depends on, back to the question of like the size of the company, because a huge major company that has tons of projects, every month, it is going to need, I feel like, more people on it to be able to get more viewpoints. And then, whereas like a smaller company, you just need maybe like a CEO or CFO or something, just where, so that those people with the higher view of like the main goal of the whole company, so they won't really, so the steering committee won't be as biased as much to one side or another. Just people who know, okay, this is the goal, how is this going to affect the goal?
Right.
Might be good to have someone like over regulatory who can understand the impact of a project in an area that's being regulated.
Okay. And then how about, let's look for anybody over here. Any thoughts? Crickets, yes.
If it's like an IT project, you should have representatives of the IT team.
Yeah.
Just so you can, because sometimes the executives may think, oh, this is something that we can do, when you talk to an IT person, they're like, that's not something we can do.
People always say,
Yeah, a couple business guys might get together and say, hey, let's go take on Amazon. We're going to build Amazon Web Services or whatever, our own version. And we're gonna, yeah, maybe the IT people say, yeah, it's not realistic. At a company I was at, they got funding to build a product that was going to compete with something that IBM had worked on for many years already. In retrospect, if they had talked with the IT people in sufficient detail ahead of time, we wouldn't have spent at least a year of our lives going down that route. So, because we were only going to have 2 developers. They had 30 developers plus other folks involved, and we weren't even able to compete with IBM in that space. We were way too late. So yeah, I think IT people are super important. Okay, right, let me just make a comment then about a steering committee. That so you guys have thrown out a bunch of great ideas, and one of the answers might be it depends. It certainly is going to depend on the type of organization. Some of the issues we're talking about there get into another area called governance. And so that's not the topic of this class, but when we talk about governance as an organization, we have all these ad hoc bodies of whoever's best involved with that area. And so it could be really low-level people, it could be senior-level people, could be people from all levels of the organization, depending on what the topic is, like security or equality or whatever else. There's like lots and lots of things that we govern in organizations, and we have committees that are dedicated to that. As it relates to selecting projects, we probably would have some representation from the business side of things, somebody that understands the strategic priorities of the business, and we probably have somebody, at least from the IT side of things, that understands what the current pipeline of projects is and what the organization is capable of doing. It's going to depend on the organization. In one organization, a small organization that I was at, we weren't formally called a steering committee. Basically, every request that came into me as the IT manager, and I would talk with my boss. And I'd say, boss, do you want to do this? And he'd say yes or no. And if he said no, then I said no to whoever requested it, and then they hated me. And that's just how things went. But it wasn't necessarily my decision. Sometimes I would advocate strongly for things. And what was hard, actually, in terms of interfacing that way, was that sometimes there were IT priorities in terms of security or aging software and equipment. And as a business guy who came through business development, he only cared about making new money. And he was just like, yeah, let the whole house burn down. I don't care. We'll make new money. I don't want to, sink money into old stuff. I've got, on any given day, an opportunity to make an extra $1 million a year with this one client. We want to go that way. And so it was kind of a battle there in terms of, kind of this cowboy-esque figure of, hey, let's go make money, and then us on the IT side of things going, we're going crazy and everything's failing on a daily basis, and we need to put money into our infrastructure. So it can be just a small group of people making those decisions, or it could be larger. Short answer, you can make it up, depending on your organization. All right, so here's a depiction of what this process looks like then. All of our projects, applications come in, steering committee looks at them, and only some come out. And these people are your friends, and the leftovers don't like you, as I've said. All right, so if you make it past that first round of screening in some way, you might do something called a risk analysis, or a feasibility study, or a business case. And there are several different types of things in addition to what's here that you could look at and study as part of making your business case. For this class, we're just going to isolate it to 3 categories, and these 3 categories I'd like you to include in your projects, your semester-long projects. So have a section dedicated to each of these topics: technical feasibility, economic feasibility, and organizational feasibility. And you should maybe look at some of the previous projects that have been created in previous years to get an idea of what that might look like in your project. Okay, so somebody read a couple of these bullet points related to technical feasibility. Go for it.
Familiarity with the application, familiarity with the technology, and review project size, and compatibility with existing systems.
Okay. At the end of the day, we're really just asking ourselves as an organization, do we have the ability to do this? Can you think of an example of when maybe a company might not have the capability of doing something that they would like to do, technology-wise? Not coming to mind so fast? Yeah.
And this is arguable, but off the top of my head, you could argue that Tesla maybe shouldn't have gone with their space endeavors as much because the technology for that wasn't as good as their car technology. I mean, that's not the best example we have.
But if NASA was going from one rocket to another rocket, you'd be like, yeah, that's reasonable. If a car maker says, I want to build a rocket,
they're 2 separate companies.
They are.
SpaceX
and I did.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And SpaceX is killing it.
So,
that example.
although I was aware that they were separate companies, if you were to assume that they were the same company, that is a decent example, though, conceptually, that if you go into an area that you're not good at, you might, for example, have a company full of web developers or desktop developers, and you're going in and you want to go into the mobile space. You might not feel very good about doing mobile development. Maybe you're really good at PHP, but nobody knows anything about Objective-C or Swift or whatever, and you're like, I'm not sure if that's a really good thing for us to do. Okay, all of you guys are working on projects with clients right now. I would like you to consider this question. Can either you or they build it technologically? So you probably have thought of a solution to their early problems that have been brought up. Are you guys capable of doing it? Or do they internally have the ability to do that, to create a solution for their problem? So discuss that in your groups for a second, and that information should show up in your paper in the future. So this is not wasted time. No.
Oh yeah, so that's your job. Better be able to make it.
It's a creation of technology, but it's also not technology, it's just like format of data.
Yeah. That that's what I was wondering. Like, you guys
Essentially,
Probably be good just if we all have our head around the problem.
so we've got our catalog, of all the services that IT provides.
Do you want to kind of go over what the problem is?
I don't know it yet.
Oh, you don't know it either? Okay.
I don't know the specifics. Like, I know the general problem. The general problem is they have a few different
So that's what we're working. So if you look at it, it's supposed to be like a,
but they have so many systems that it's really confusing. Like, if you need a certain thing, especially if you're new, there's nowhere to go to find because it's in like 30 different software.
So the plan would be to consolidate it.
So there's
well, like I just told you, like say for instance, like you're looking at someone and they're in you have like
All right, let's stop that conversation. We'll have a chance to do this again in just a second on the next topic. So,
kind of thing.
do you have any questions for me as it relates to that conversation you just had? Nope. Okay. So I think this is in the textbook. Just an example of what the case related to, or the analysis related to technical risk might be. In this case, they were talking about what needs to get done here, and then there were some bullet points related, assessing their capability in different areas related to the technical task that needed to be done. So just a real simplistic way of identifying, oh hey, we're talking about building websites, and yeah, we've got a team that can do websites, so we should be fine with that. Maybe something else related to Linux and MySQL, some other technologies they plan to use. Looks like that was maybe a little bit harder for them because it was a really tiny project. Again, they thought that, yeah, we still think we can do it, or we especially think we can do it because it's a small project. So just take all those factors into account and talk about why you think you or they as a company currently can do this. Okay, next one, organizational feasibility. We don't need to read through the bullet points on this one, but it's just asking the question, will they use it? So is this on your radar at all right now in your life about, maybe as you reflect back on your failed project presentations, is this a problem, is this a risk that you could build applications that either internal customers or external customers will not use? Can you come across that, and could you give me, can you comment on that at all, where you've run into that?
Google Plus.
Google Plus, okay. Yeah, so even though you have all this cachet as this really great company, everybody loves Gmail and just the Google search, you build Google Plus, but they might not use it, okay. And why, yeah, I don't know if that one fits as well in terms of a discussion on it, but yeah, certainly they didn't do some of their, didn't talk with the users enough about that, yeah.
The bridge, BYU Bridge, before they went to Handshake, I
Okay.
think was,
I don't know what either of those are.
so Handshake is where we apply for jobs
Okay.
for students, so people that recruit on campus post the jobs on Handshake.
Uh-huh.
Prior to that, it was the bridge, and it was pretty hard to use compared to Handshake, and there were lots of features on it that could have been like utilized, but none of the students used them because they were too hard to figure out, and they were always advertising on campus to use those things, and none of us ever did.
Okay. And it was because it's too hard?
Yeah, this wasn't intuitive.
Okay. So there are different areas of software that I would point out. Sometimes there's software that's mandatory usage, and sometimes there's software that's optional usage. I think in our industry, it's a particular risk when we're talking about purchasing, acquiring, or building optional usage software, because sometimes people won't, frequently, users will not use it. Okay, does anybody have any other examples they'd like to jump in with? Okay, Eric.
I did an on-campus internship, I think last year,
Uh-huh.
and we were supposed to build an app for this guy out in Georgia. And we built the app, but it was like a very, like niche kind of thing that he didn't really have a marketing plan for, and also didn't plan on like having developers support it after we were done building it. So it didn't really get a lot of visibility, and it's not on the App Store anymore.
Oh, no.
Because he didn't, I don't know, plan for supporting it and market it very
Okay.
well.
Okay, I'm not going to pick up your questions. It's just in the interest of time. But I want to talk about one area where this is particularly problematic, and that is historically in the healthcare industry. The healthcare industry has always had a lot of inefficiencies in it, at least on the IT data side of things. And one of the things that's been a problem with that has been the doctors themselves. They got used to writing up prescriptions and stuff like that in their scratchy little handwriting, and they don't have time to be using technology. And so for many years, we've had people create products or sell hospital systems on products that maybe at best the hospital staff, like the nurses, would use, but the doctors would be like, no, I'm not using that, I'm just going to use paper. And so we've had a lot of generations of products in the healthcare industry that just failed because the doctor's like, I'm not using that, because they're old school. And that just completely undermined the whole thing. No matter how many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars you spend on the software, if the doctors at the end of the day didn't use it, it was sunk. So that happened a lot. So you got to know, as part of the organizational risk assessment, is there any possibility that people won't use it? The higher up you go, I think that's the bigger risk. If you don't have senior management support of whatever application you're pushing through, then you've got a real big risk factor. Okay, so take another minute or two here and discuss as a group whether the organizational context for your project is such that you think they'll actually use a solution if you build them one.
If it's built well, then.
And the users could be taking that. If you hear so many
Some people just like run program. Need is not all people need is career center. All people know that staff and their staff, right?
They have to
and then people technical CSR.
Is it not because they're not owned by Ancestry?
Where you fix your computer when you're in the library.
So they have
there's people who represent IT in those areas. So, yeah, it's all of those people come into the service catalog and find.
So we just want to make it more user-friendly.
Much more user-friendly on the front end and more easy to manage on the back end.
Okay, so these services, they're all on the same database, or are they pulling from different?
So different components come from different places.
So
different components.
So this here is called a knowledge article. So there's a whole section of.
Is that like description?
It's like things that's providing knowledge to support and users. So this is description. It's just description from one data. This is what this person part. All information.
Super diagram.
And then actually accessing the product in terms of ordering it. Somebody can order it. And that's another idea. Whatever that graph from running, I was like, I don't know how to make it stable. That's what I read. Three or four different databases that hold.
And yes, your wife should use this.
Okay, so it's pulling it from different APIs.
It's not an API, but
Well, it has to be to access that database. That's how the application interacts with it.
Yeah, it's an API, but it's through something called service now. Yeah, so I'll show you.
What's service now?
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and stop there. In the interest of time, us only having a few minutes left, let me just kind of hurry through this last little bit. So you'll want a section in there discussing whether you think the context, the environment there is such that you think that the solution you built for them will actually get used. And obviously we're going through this process because if the answer comes back no on any of these, if we can't build it, if they're not going to use it, any of those should be red flags saying that we should not go on to the next phase, which is analysis, and spend a whole bunch of time doing all those interviews and diagrams and things like that in the real world. Okay. Lastly, we have the economic feasibility. We could throw in here not only financial things, but just for simplicity, we could throw in there some intangible benefits as well that might accrue to an organization. So this one, since many of you were thinking about being accountants and are good at accounting and finance, this whole idea may be very appealing to you, this idea that you do some financial analysis based on projected costs and projected revenue, and you put together, you could have like a summary page about it with some things on there like break-even analysis, return on investment, things like that. So look to these slides and in the book for some examples of benefits in business cases, as well as you could look at previous projects. In particular, I want to call your attention to doing some type of formal analysis. Usually when I teach this class, I spend some time talking about net present value and discounted cash flows and things like that. But fortunately, I now realize that virtually all of you got an A in finance, so therefore I don't have to talk about it. At least one person in each of your group is probably going to be good at it. So just leverage people's strengths. Here's an example of a breakdown that you might include in your projects. This one had, just to kind of highlight some features in it, this one over the course of 6 years, year 0 being right now, has some different concepts captured in it, which are the, up here we have the benefits in terms of the revenue with discounted cash flows that they're considering. There's development costs, so upfront expenses as well as ongoing expenses. So they have two different types of expenses considered. And then they just use that information and sum it up in different ways below. I included a picture from a book which has a different sort of breakdown for how you might look at the benefits and the expenses from a discounted perspective. So if you look at that carefully enough in a quiet moment, you should be able to figure it out. And I also put up a spreadsheet that has some examples of this stuff in there. And I'll post this slide deck right after class. But let's see if I can find... So I posted a couple spreadsheets with some examples of how you could do these calculations. So worst case scenario, you could just start plugging in your own numbers in the spreadsheet, take a screenshot of that, and that would work as well. Some students, they do some simple cash-on-cash return, no discounted cash flows, and put that into their projects. That's fine. You should have some type of economic analysis in there. All right, but let me just say something about the idea of doing the economic analysis. That it's relatively hard. It's not hard with respect to putting together a spreadsheet. It's hard to actually do it right. Because you're kind of, well, one of the reasons why I think it's hard is because you haven't even done your analysis at this point, so you don't know how much money you're really going to be spending on development until you know a great deal about the details of the development that you're going to be doing. So it's hard to say, oh, we're going to spend $1.3 million or $56,000.20. Like, you don't know that at this point. You haven't even done an interview yet. You just have a basic idea of what they want. So that's hard. Another idea is in terms of benefits, you're just taking some crazy guess. I mean, think about all the startups. Virtually every startup that went out of business is going to say, we are going to capture just 1% of the market and be millionaires. But it doesn't work most of the time. So we can put projections out there in terms of what we think we're going to get in terms of a return, but oftentimes it's just a guess. But that being said, in terms of these type of projects for integrative exercise or for this course project, it looks really good in there. It shows the level of thinking that you're able to do. You're able to look at numbers, make projections, do net present value calculations. That shows that you have more awareness than just being a developer. You also think like a business person, and that's really good. So I look forward to seeing that in your stuff. And with that, we're about a minute over, so I will end there. Have a good day. Good weekend.